It's Kathy. I hope you're doing well. We made it to Sunday morning OJ. He's sleeping right now. His lawyer's almost sleeping right now. Do you want to know why they're sleeping right now? Because the questions they're asking are freaking boring. But we got a motions hearing. Not today. And maybe we'll get to it tomorrow. We're on August 3rd, guys. That's crazy. Oof, that is crazy. Linus, I'm so glad. I love that for you.
Is it correct then, every time you've been retained to look at evidence in an individual case, it has been to try to keep that evidence out?
I think that's vague and overbroad.
It's the same. Rephrase the question.
Isn't it correct, Dr. Gerdes, that every time you've been retained to review another laboratory's work, it has been with the intent, if possible, of attacking that evidence?
Objection, that's improper in terms of intent.
Sustained.
How many times have you testified as an expert in court in this area?
23 times.
How many times have you been retained to look at laboratory work?
Probably on the order of 30.
You don't testify in all the cases you're retained in, is that right?
That's true. Sometimes cases are, due to the strategy of the particular case, I'm not asked to come in and testify.
Is it correct that sometimes as a result of your review, a defense attorney doesn't call you as a witness?
That's true.
Every time you've testified has been for a criminal defendant, correct?
Yes.
And in each of those testimonies, you have described your opinion about difficulties with PCR, correct?
That's correct.
Now, the laboratories, and I believe you said you've been retained about 30 times, or was that an exact number?
About.
Okay. Is it correct that most of those times it has been to review work done by Dr. Blake?
I wouldn't say most of the time. I would say maybe a third of the time at this point.
So about 10 times? Roughly.
Approximately, yes.
During those 10 times, did you testify?
Yes.
And did you testify to your opinions about the unreliability of results obtained by Dr. Blake?
I testified to my concerns about contamination and PCR in a forensic setting.
And in particular, the reliability of the results reported by Dr. Blake in those cases, correct?
The testimony goes to expressing and explaining the potential risks of this technology.
Well, on those prior occasions, didn't you testify to 12 or more jurors, including alternates, and were trying to give them reasons why they shouldn't believe the results?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained. Rephrase the question.
Your Honor, may request a sidebar on this line of questioning.
As far as your testimony in this particular case, haven't you testified to the same things that you've testified to 23 times before?
Objection,
I've been very consistent. This technology has some risks with it, and I think it's important for the jury to know about those so that they can make a reasonable decision as to how much weight to put on this kind of evidence. And yes, I've always testified to that fact.
How many times have you testified about use of polymarker, for instance?
That's a more recent type of gene system. Without looking it up, I would guess probably 4 or 5 times.
And in those instances, have you testified about why those results or results obtained using polymarker shouldn't be believed by a jury?
Objection to the form of that question.
Sustained. Rephrase the question.
Have you testified in those instances about your concerns about the reliability of results obtained using polymarker?
Polymarker is another PCR system. It's susceptible to the same arguments, the same reservations.
And,
yes.
And lastly, how many times have you testified, if any, about the marker D1S80?
Perhaps 3 times. A small number.
And in those instances, have you again testified about your opinions about the unreliability of the use of that genetic marker?
I testify to the risks that need to be considered in any PCR-based testing system.
I have a concern about these questions.
Well, excuse me.
May I approach about this line of questioning?
No, not at this point. Proceed.
Dr. Gerdes, could you describe for us, please, how many times have you personally conducted just the PCR process itself, this amplification process, at an actual bench, lab bench?
Most of the testing that is done in our lab by PCR right now is done by technicians who are under my direction. I probably have personally done on the order of 100 or so, or more.
Is that something you do now?
Did I personally do testing? No.
Correct. And in fact, you testify, do you not? And I mean in areas, well, let me rephrase that. Do you ever testify as a result of your laboratory's work in areas other than forensic stain analysis like this case? You testify about paternity. Why don't
Yes,
make
I
a
have
note of it?
testified with regards to paternity, yes.
When you testify in that regard, do you testify based on the results obtained by your analysts or technicians?
Yes, I do.
In other words, you didn't personally do the work in those cases wherein you ultimately testify.
That's correct, but I'm responsible to review the work, and we have, if you have appropriate controls, you can look at the documentation of this kind of testing and determine if it was done correctly, if the controls look right, you have photos to look at, and so forth, and pick up problems. So that's my responsibility.
And in fact, this process of reviewing the work of a technician, that's the same thing that occurred in this case with regard to Cellmark, for instance.
I'm sorry, I don't understand you.
Sure. As far as the manner in which Cellmark conducted testing, are you familiar with that testing in this case?
Cellmark's testing, yes.
Yes. For instance, who were the bench analysts who conducted the actual physical testing at Cellmark?
Paula Yates, I believe, was one, and I don't recall the other person.
Would it be Julie Cooper?
Julie Cooper.
In other words, they physically conducted the testing as far as using the reagents, conducting electrophoresis if that was part of an individual process, and so forth, correct?
That's correct.
And in this particular case, are you familiar with the fact that Robin Cotton testified as an expert?
Yes,
You're familiar with Dr. Cotton?
I am.
You've had contact with her before as a result of your review of work done by Cellmark Diagnostics.
Yes, I have.
Dr. Cotton, in this case, testified based on her review of the work conducted by her analysts, correct?
That's correct.
And that's scientifically appropriate to do so, in your opinion, isn't it?
It is.
You described yesterday, Dr. Gerdes, the fact that your laboratory charges $100 an hour for your work in this case. Is that right?
That's correct.
Has your laboratory received funds so far for your work in this case?
Yes.
How much? Approximately.
Somewhere on the order of 20,000, I would guess. I don't know exactly.
Could it be more?
It could be.
Does that include all of the time you've put into this case up to today and right now?
No.
Can you estimate for us the amount of money that your laboratory is owed as a result of your work, including today?
I would guess you probably would add another 10,000 onto that.
So the total would be approximately $30,000, is that right?
That's correct.
Could that amount be higher than that?
I don't have the figures, so it depends on how long I undergo, how long this goes on.
When were you initially retained by the defense in this case?
If I remember correctly, I was first phoned or called in September, either September or October
Of 94?
of 94.
You've put a lot of time into this case.
Yes,
You've reviewed all the typing strips at the Los Angeles Police Department through approximately May of 93 through August of 94, correct?
that's correct.
That's a fairly large task, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
That took a lot of time.
It did.
You also reviewed, well, let me phrase it as a question. Did you review all of the documentation from the Department of Justice in this case?
I did.
That is a very large amount of material also, is that correct?
It is.
Did you review all of the material from Cellmark Diagnostics in this case?
I did.
That is probably a little less than Department of Justice material, is that right?
It is.
But still a substantial amount of data to look at.
Yes,
When you look at this material, it takes a long period of time, doesn't it?
it does.
You described the fact, well, let me rephrase that if I may. What year did you begin with the laboratory, IAD?
1988,
And what year did you begin testifying as an expert for criminal defendants?
1990.
You described the fact yesterday that there is a replacement for you that takes your place when you're either gone or working on other cases, that is criminal cases?
Well, not specifically. It's not like they hire someone to come in. Basically, there are 3 individuals who are directors of this laboratory. We're all directors. And while I'm gone, someone has to take over those responsibilities. They take over.
Okay, so the laboratory doesn't bring in another person,
No.
that is, hires an outside individual.
No, they don't.
Basically, the other directors in your lab, was that the term?
Yes.
They pick up the slack, for lack of a better term?
Yes.
So your laboratory doesn't lose any money in terms of having to pay anyone else?
Not specifically.
Could I have just a moment, Aaron? As far as your salary, well, do you receive a salary?
Yes, I do.
Does that work out to $100 an hour?
I believe it does. No, it doesn't. It's less than that.
It's substantially less, isn't it?
Can you tell me a yearly figure for $100 an hour so that I make it easy for me?
Well, let's see. Let's take an 8-hour day. That's about $800 a day.
Yeah.
And how much would that be a week?
Okay, 5,600.
Okay.
So,
How about a 5-day work week instead of 7?
well, okay. I work 7 days a week. Okay, so 4,000. So okay, we're talking about 16,000.
Over 200,000?
No, it would be about half.
Okay.
Half of that.
Can you estimate for us approximately how much your laboratory has profited, how much money they've taken in from your testimony and work in criminal cases? Is there any way you
Total?
put a rough estimate, total?
Over the 5 years, perhaps somewhere on the order of 80,000 or maybe 100,000 over 5 years.
So is it correct then that your laboratory is billing approximately 2 times or twice as much as you make when you're at home working in the lab?
You could interpret it that way.
All right, Dr. Gerdes, I'd like to shift your attention to RFLP typing. You're familiar with it, correct?
Yes,
You have no disagreement whatsoever with its reliability, correct?
that's correct.
In fact, it's been used in science for over 10 years. Is that safe to say?
Yes,
Developed by Sir Alec Jeffreys in London along with Dr. White, working
Well,
independently.
the underlying scientific principles actually are traced back to an individual named Southern who developed the Southern blotting technique. And those individuals you mentioned were involved in the first to apply it for forensics.
And it's a technology that's used around the world, correct?
That's correct.
Life and death decisions are made based on results using RFLP typing?
I guess you could say that.
Well, diagnosing a disease that might kill a person, that's a life and death matter, isn't it?
Yes.
And it's used to diagnose a whole host of diseases, correct?
It's primarily used in diagnosing genetic diseases and in the looking at certain gene alterations involved in some cancers.
It's used to look at, for instance, whether a person suffers from cystic fibrosis, right?
That's a genetic disease, yes.
It's used to determine whether or not a person has, for instance, muscular dystrophy.
Yes.
It's used to determine whether or not tissue can be transplanted, as you described yesterday, from one person to another.
Most labs don't use RFLP at this point.
What do they use now?
They use PCR-based testing.
The same PCR that you described yesterday. The technology.
The technology is the same, yes.
And in fact, isn't it true that there are a whole host of uses of RFLP typing?
Yes.
You use the RFLP technique in your paternity work, correct?
Yes.
Does that ever involve, for instance, making interpretations on bands that might not look exactly like another band from another sample?
It does.
In other words, it involves some interpretation, correct?
That's correct.
You may see faint bands, is that right?
Occasionally.
You may see, as you've used the term, artifacts.
That's true.
Incidentally, when you have conducted a paternity test, does that involve numbers at all when you report results?
Yes, it does.
In other words, you calculate a statistical probability or whatever term to describe how unusual it is to see these two samples matching, for instance, from a child and an alleged father.
We calculate that using what's called Bayesian statistics, which is different than what is used in a forensic setting, but it's statistics.
And does it involve multiplying results over more than one genetic marker?
It does.
IAD doesn't use RFLP typing in any forensic work, that is, by anyone in the laboratory, correct?
That's correct.
Setting aside paternity.
That's correct.
Are you aware of the number of labs using RFLP typing in forensic stain analysis?
I don't know the exact number. I know there are quite a few using that,
It's in the hundreds, isn't it?
perhaps.
Dr. Gerdes, are you offering an opinion to this jury that forensic PCR typing doesn't produce accurate results? On that question.
The PCR process itself, the method of amplifying DNA, is a sound scientific principle. But the way in which it is currently, basically my opinion is it's inadequately controlled in forensic testing at the moment. And it hasn't been adequately validated for that technology transfer. That's my testimony.
And you have testified to that for the last 5 years, correct?
I have.
You've offered that opinion all 23 times you've testified, correct?
Yes.
I do have an objection at this point. It has to do to legal ruling with respect to the nature of those proceedings. I think this
Excuse me,
is-
object to the objection also, Your
Chicken,
Honor.
Noted.
parm, and
Press the sidebar.
spaghetti.
Overruled.
Sanctions.
Let's move on.
Dr. Gerdes, in your opinion then, is PCR also not appropriate to use to exclude people in forensic cases?
That's correct.
Can't use it to include somebody,
That's right.
can't use it to exclude someone.
The potential error, in my opinion, of additional dots due to contamination could just as likely cause a false exclusion as inclusion.
As you're using the terms inclusion and exclusion, what do you mean? Just to make sure we're talking the
Well,
same
inclusion would mean that you match a sample with an individual that results in them being accused of a crime, in a sense. And exclusion would be that due to that testing, you would come up with a result that would say that they could not have done it.
You do hold the opinion that the use of PCR in medical uses, however, is sufficient in terms of sufficient reliability to be used to produce accurate results.
I do, based on all of the things we talked about yesterday when we discussed all of those items in terms of technology transfer and the relative risks of the two.
As far as this PCR process, that was invented by Dr. Kerry Mullis, correct?
That's correct.
Is he present in the audience?
He is.
Where is he?
He's sitting second individual over on the first row behind the desk there.
Between Mr. Ullman and next to Mr. Douglas,
Yes.
and behind Mr. Shea.
Isn't it correct, Dr. Gerdes, that your view that PCR is okay to use in medical uses is due to the number of genetic markers that are available to test and the fact that you can confirm those results with other tests?
Compound.
Is it correct that it's your belief that PCR is acceptable to use in medical diagnostics or medical uses because...
I'm sorry. Please finish the question. I'm sorry.
I'll start again if I may. Thank you. Is it correct, Dr. Gerdes, that your opinion about the scientific acceptance in terms of why you believe it's appropriate to use, I'm referring to PCR in medical diagnostic uses, is based on the number of genetic markers you can look at? That's one reason.
No, my objection here is to specifically which applications to PCR. I think it's vague.
It's vague. Distinct.
When you feel, and you offer the opinion that the use of PCR in medical uses is appropriate, correct?
It is.
What uses are you referring to?
There are a variety of specific applications. The ones that we use in my lab are the detection of infectious agents such as cytomegalovirus or chlamydia, and the typing of HLA for the purpose of bone marrow
All right.
transplant.
All right, do you still stand by that comment after he just slapped you with chlamydia?
Where you know you were working with a sample from a given individual.
Okay, let's start with CMV. That's a virus, correct?
That's correct.
And can we use the term CMV as a
Yes, yes,
shorthand manner?
yes.
When you attempt to diagnose, and is that what you do, use PCR to attempt to diagnose the presence of CMV?
That's correct.
Do you look at just one genetic marker?
Yes, we do.
When you test for the disease, and is it proper to call chlamydia a disease?
Yes.
How many markers do you look at for that particular item?
The kit that is includes one specific marker that you look for.
Is there any significance to looking at multiple markers in an individual sample in the medical arena?
Under certain circumstances, I think that would be a good idea.
As far as criminal cases, do you feel it's a good idea to look at more than one marker?
It gives you additional information.
And the more information that's available, the better, right?
Correct.
As far as PCR, is it correct that there are thousands of U.S. laboratories using PCR?
I think that's a fair statement.
Life and death decisions are made based on the results of PCR typing every day, correct?
Yes.
PCR is used to find out, for instance, if food or dairy products have organisms in them that shouldn't be there, right?
I'm not aware of that. It certainly is possible.
Is it used to diagnose whether or not fetuses have diseases?
Yes.
It's used to diagnose many, if not most, of the same diseases that RFLP typing is either used today or was previously used. Is that right?
That's true.
Incidentally, as far as disease diagnosis, and you have some experience in that area, correct?
That's correct.
As far as the use of PCR, are the results of those diagnoses always clear-cut?
Not always.
In other words, it isn't always either there's a real clear answer that the person has it or there's a real clear answer that the person doesn't, right?
That's correct.
And there are some diseases where there's a gray area in between those two, isn't that right?
That's true.
The results of those uses of PCR are utilized by doctors to counsel people on whether they have a disease, correct?
in those specific, this situation that you've set up, they would obviously look at other clinical factors to try and make a determination. It would be one aspect of their decision in terms of their diagnosis.
And isn't it true that in many of those instances, doctors have to counsel patients when they have to tell them, you may or may not have this disease?
That's true.
Is that a significant decision in your viewpoint as to what the patient decides?
Yes.
Now, this technology involving PCR has been used to identify American war dead, correct?
Yes.
Including in the Persian Gulf War?
I'm familiar with that, yes.
And isn't it true Cellmark was a laboratory that performed that testing for the United States government?
I believe it was.
So further along these lines, I think it's cumulative and
Overruled. Overruled.
Is it correct, Dr. Gerdes, that there are over 14,000 publications on the use of PCR, scientific publications?
That's true.
PCR is used by every molecular biology lab that you're aware of, correct?
Absolutely.
Is it your opinion that there's no self-respecting molecular biologist alive who doesn't use PCR right now?
I think that's a fair statement.
Now, PCR in your own lab at IAD has
No.
been used since what year?
No.
We
I was going to let that slide because I'm eating. You know, I'm happy I got food. It's hot for once. I was just going to let that slide. Objection cumulative? Are you freaking joking with me right now? How dare they? How dare he say that? I'm shook again.
started using it when I arrived at IED, 1988 or shortly thereafter.
That was, well, let me rephrase that. Already in place in your laboratory were RFLP techniques, correct?
No, actually, I was hired to set those up.
So when you came into the lab, you introduced both RFLP typing and PCR typing.
That's correct.
Your laboratory then has used PCR either in a development phase or in an actual casework phase then for about 7 years. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Is it correct that most of the current work that your laboratory performs is done by PCR?
No, that's not true.
What percentage would you estimate of the casework at your well, let's broaden it out. What percentage would you estimate of all the work conducted in your laboratory is done by PCR?
Approximately 30%.
Does that include casework,
Yes.
where you report out results following the use of PCR in the areas of, for instance, whether a person has CMV?
That's correct. I wouldn't be 30% of the CMV diagnosis. The problem is certain techniques use PCR, and we use them for that. Other techniques use other scientific methods, and we do a wide range of different tests.
Now, you routinely use PCR for this virus detection,
For CMV,
right?
we do, yes.
And that's a viral infection, right?
Correct.
What is it you actually analyze? What do you receive in the lab to look at?
We receive a blood specimen.
Is that a difficult diagnosis?
It is a difficult diagnosis in terms of traditional methods. I feel that PCR has made it, our quantitative PCR, once it was adapted to a quantitative method, has made that diagnosis more reliable.
As far as this virus use of PCR, let me rephrase that if I might. In your use of PCR to detect this virus, are you looking for levels of the virus as opposed to whether a particular allele is present?
That's correct.
So you're interpreting a range of possible data and make a decision within that range whether or not the virus is there.
Number one, is it there? And number two, how much is there?
Do you have to make any subjective interpretations about the levels as far as making a conclusion whether the person has it?
It's an objective conclusion based on a standard curve that we have derived and the methodology we've derived so that we can precisely measure levels of the DNA from CMZ.
Incidentally, and I'm not sure the term came up yesterday, but it may have, but one of the instruments used in PCR frequently is called a thermal cycler. Is that right?
That's correct.
And your laboratory, I assume, has one or more thermal cyclers?
Yes.
Who manufactures that product?
Perkin-Elmer.
Also, and you're aware of testimony, are you not, about a corporation referred to as Roche?
Correct.
And in fact, Roche manufactures the typing kit used in this case for DQ alpha, polymarker, and the other PCR marker, in this case D1S80.
That's correct.
Is there any relationship between Perkin-Elmer and Roche?
Yes.
What's that?
I don't know the details, but basically Roche holds the licensing, the patent, if you will, for the PCR process, and they have negotiated a marketing agreement through Perkin-Elmer for Perkin-Elmer to market the kits that Roche develops.
So your laboratory bought this thermal cycler from PerkinElmer, who is related to Roche, correct?
Correct.
In your opinion, is that thermal cycler that you used reliable?
That's the best thermal cycler on the market, in my opinion.
Does it have a model number?
The one we use is called a 9600. There are other models, but that's the one that we have.
How many samples can you place in that thermal cycler at one time?
It has a capability of 96.
Incidentally, when your, well, let me rephrase it. Your technicians use the thermal cycler, correct?
Sorry,
correct.
And they
Salty, I
place
missed
tubes
that.
in
I
the various
microwaved
wells in
it.
the thermal cycler?
Correct.
Do they change
Yep.
gloves between every sample that they touch when they put in the samples?
That means part of it was burning hot and the other part was ice cold.
They change gloves between samples when they prepare those tubes.
That's
I
not
mean,
what
the
I'm
tubes the tubes are in strips, so that after you've placed them, I mean, once you've loaded the tube, then you put it in the thermocycler. You're carrying like a rack of tubes that are placed in.
When they place tubes, individual tubes into the thermal cycler, do they change gloves between each tube?
Not when they're placing it in the thermocycler.
What's the most number of samples that have been run in that cycler at one time?
It has a capability of 96.
What's the most that have been run in your laboratory?
In my
at one time?
laboratory, I
Correct.
think there have been a couple of occasions where we've run all 96.
And that's the most that it'll hold, correct?
Without
Correct.
changing
That wasn't
gloves?
on cases, however.
I'm shocked.
Do you know what type of thermal cycler the Los Angeles Police Department uses?
They have the 9600 as well.
Same exact thermal cycler that you have in terms of the model and its capabilities.
Correct.
What about the Department of Justice?
I think they have the 480, if I remember correctly, which is the model that preceded the 9600.
Is there anything in your opinion about the Model 480 that's unreliable as opposed to the 9600?
No.
What about Cellmark?
They also, I believe they also have the 480.
Incidentally, you also described bone marrow transplant tests that are performed in your lab, correct?
Correct.
Do those use PCR in any manner?
Yes, they do.
And you've also described this national registry, correct?
Correct.
The national registry requires, for purposes of inclusion in this registry, PCR typing be done, correct?
That's correct.
And in particular, they require that a particular genetic marker region be used to conduct that typing, correct?
That's correct.
And that's the HLA region?
It's not the same, it's not DQ alpha. It's another HLA gene. It's called DR beta.
Okay, my question was, is that part of the HLA gene?
It's part of that complex, but there are more than one gene in that complex, so it's not the same gene, but it's in the same area.
Is it correct then that the DQ alpha gene is in the same area as the exact gene that you test in your laboratory for bone marrow typing?
Yes.
You've mentioned DQ alpha and I believe DQ beta yesterday as well.
Yes.
Are they related?
Yes, they are.
And I think you may have mentioned DR as well. Are these just different particular genes that are located close to one another?
Yes.
Do you test the DQ beta gene in your lab?
Yes.
Do you test the DR gene in your lab?
Yes.
Isn't it correct that by testing more than one gene, you increase the likelihood of your finding important information in your work in your laboratory?
Yes.
Do you use PCR for any other purposes other than bone marrow transplant information and looking for CMV?
We are very close to using it for the purpose of looking at donors, as I explained the other day, in terms of looking for infectious agents in donors.
Incidentally, as far as the actual process of conducting PCR typing, amplification and then typing, that process in a broad sense is the same whether it's medical or forensic, correct?
The basic setting up of the method in terms of how it's set up, that's the same, yes.
In your lab, do you ever test degraded samples?
No.
Is it your testimony that you've never conducted any casework analysis on a degraded sample?
Yes.
As far as the use of PCR in other laboratories, and let's go outside criminal cases and forensic, isn't it correct that PCR is used on degraded samples?
It's being used for that.
What are some examples of that?
In the forensic community?
No, outside forensics.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood your question, and I'm
Okay.
having a hard time thinking of one.
Are you aware of the use of PCR, for instance, in the study of endangered animals?
This is,
No, I'm not.
You've never heard of it?
No.
Are you aware of the use of PCR? Well, you are aware of the use of PCR to identify remains of war dead, correct?
It's in a different context.
I'm aware that is done.
We're
Well,
talking
wasn't it?
specifically degraded samples, correct?
Correct.
All right, proceed.
You're aware that it's done on war dead?
We've established that.
Isn't it correct that that PCR typing was used on, for instance, soldiers who were brutally killed in the Persian Gulf War?
Sustained. You've already asked that.
All right. Isn't it true that with regard to that usage, that those are bodies that have been violently killed out in the desert?
Objection to this line at this point, Your Honor.
Overruled. Goes to the, this is in the context of degraded samples.
Correct.
All right, proceed.
Yes, that's true.
Would you consider a body that's been out in the desert for hours or days degraded?
Yes.
PCR has been used to type mummies, isn't that correct?
Yes.
Is that a degraded sample?
I'm sure it is.
You described, for instance, the use of this... I'm sorry, let me rephrase that question. Your work in your laboratory is mainly
think they
with
were all
infectious
laughing at
materials
Shaq?
as far as PCR, right?
Well, we do both infectious materials as well as HLA typing, and those I don't think would be considered, the registry individuals are not considered to be infectious. Of course, you handle everything as though it's potentially infectious.
Is PCR used to, for instance, type the presence of certain diseases in samples that have been obtained during a biopsy? For instance, a portion removed from a person's body.
Occasionally it can be done for that.
Is that a sterile sample?
It's collected sterilely in an operating room, for instance.
Okay, but is the sample sterile, or as you've used the term, was it aseptic?
Well, certainly tissue is sterile when you collect it unless it's infected.
And if it's infected, it isn't sterile, is it?
No.
And in fact, those samples are frequently sent out for PCR typing to determine whether or not there is a disease or infection there, right?
Yes, but what you're looking for there is the infection.
Are you aware of the use of PCR on samples that have been preserved in paraffin?
PCR has been used for that.
What is a sample preserved in paraffin? Could you describe that?
In the normal process of doing what's called pathology, tissue samples are frequently embedded with this wax or paraffin that allows you to cut sections and put them on a microscope slide and see the morphology, the architecture of the cells, and pathologists then can look at that and determine disease states.
Are those samples ever degraded?
I wouldn't consider it degraded. They're basically fixed and then embedded with this paraffin, and the process itself results in cross-linking of the protein in the sample to the DNA, so that it's very difficult to extract the DNA after that.
Well, you say you wouldn't consider it degraded. These can be samples that are years old, can't they?
Yes, but they're fixed and embedded in paraffin. That pretty much preserves them.
Well, is it your testimony that those samples that are preserved in paraffin, the DNA is in exactly as good a form as it was when it was removed?
Yes, it is.
So there's no degradation in those samples that may be years old, period?
There's no degradation in that section. When you try and extract the DNA, because of the cross-linkage, you get DNA that is in smaller pieces. But it's not due to any kind of contamination with bacteria that eat, nothing like that.
That never happens.
Not in those sections.
There's a fairly common term known as a pap smear, is that right?
Yes,
And that's taken from women as part of an analysis, correct? Or for purposes of an analysis.
yes.
In your opinion, is that an example of a sample that is sterile?
No, it's not sterile.
That sample, while not sterile, is still tested to determine whether or not there may be a disease present in that individual.
Yeah, but what you're misunderstanding is you're testing for an infectious agent in that. You're not testing for a specific human gene. So you're looking for the contaminant in this case.
Well,
You're looking for the bacterial contaminant.
are there any other contaminants that might be present in that sample?
There are a variety of things, I'm sure, but
The presence of those variety of contaminants doesn't stop that sample from being tested for the disease that's being looked for, correct?
the PCR is very precise, and you design it so that you're only looking for the specific microorganism you're interested in, such as chlamydia, which we do in our lab. That particular PCR will not detect herpes or a variety of other things that perhaps might be in that sample. It's designed to very specifically look for only the chlamydia organism.
So in other words, one of the important components or parts of PCR typing is designing it to look for what the scientist is trying to find.
That's true, and if you have a system that looks just simply for human DNA, that's where the problem comes in.
Well, objection, move to strike the last portion of the answer, Your Honor. As far as known samples in your lab, do you use any cards? And by card, I mean a card that a portion of a liquid blood sample would be poured onto so that it can be used in that form.
Never.
Are you aware of that in the that is its use in the medical diagnostic area?
I believe there are some areas where they're doing that, looking for infectious. Perhaps I've read papers on hepatitis, for instance, where they'll do that. But again, you're misunderstanding. In that case, you're looking for the hepatitis organism, so you have a
I'm
specific
sorry, Your Honor.
mechanism.
Objection, move to strike the last portion.
Overruled.
As far as DNA is something that basically degrades, correct?
It can.
And it can degrade to the point where there's no activity left, or the DNA perishes, for lack of a better term.
Well, degradation just simply means that due to whatever reason, the DNA is this long, stringy molecule. It starts getting chopped up into smaller and smaller pieces. Ultimately, you end up with such small pieces that when you attempt to analyze it, you can't.
Focusing on samples, and let's just take a blood stain, for instance, that's outside. Something outside can be exposed to sunlight, right?
Yes.
Sunlight doesn't change a DNA type, does it?
No.
Rain doesn't change a DNA type, does it?
No.
Soil doesn't change a type?
No.
Leaves don't change a DNA type?
No.
Those things can, however, lead to DNA being less and less typable. In other words, the DNA be at levels where it becomes more difficult to get an answer, if one can get an answer at all.
That's correct.
Isn't it correct that the difference between medical specimens that are subjected to PCR and forensic specimens is where the sample came from?
That's one difference.
That's the most important difference, isn't it?
Yes.
Now, you're familiar in this case of testimony that has described that following PCR, several genetic markers were typed using this dot blot technique.
Yes.
And in fact, you've observed the use of that technique in all approximately 30 cases you've reviewed, right?
Correct.
You use dot blotting in your own laboratory, correct?
The direct dot blotting, yes. It's a little different, but the same, essentially the same.
In other words, whether direct or indirect, that's not a major difference, or is that a significant difference in terms of the opinions you've offered over the last 2 days?
I don't believe so.
That dot blotting in your laboratory includes dot blotting following PCR on vaginal specimens, correct?
No, we don't do dot blotting on vaginal specimens.
Have you ever done dot blotting on vaginal specimens in your laboratory?
At one time, we did look for an organism, human papillomavirus, using that technology, but we don't at the moment.
I hope that term has a, is it also nicknamed HPV?
Yes.
Do you take photographs of the dot blots in your laboratory?
Yes. Well, it depends. I mean, basically, our system at the moment, the way we run dot blots, is the detection methodology is what's called chemiluminescence, and it results in basically the release of light during the reaction. And so it's more like developing a photograph. So what we really keep are what would be similar to the negatives.
All right. As far as, have you ever photographed dot blots in your laboratory?
We've either used autoradiography or chemiluminescence, so I don't believe so.
As far as your own experience in criminal cases, that has included looking at photographs of dot blots, correct?
Yes,
Looking at a photograph isn't the same as looking at a strip live, correct?
that's correct.
And in fact, would it be correct to say that the analyst who sees a dot blot strip live is in a better position to see exactly the reactions that have occurred?
One of the limitations of this system is those dots fade fairly rapidly. So it is true that the analyst might see something that would fade away, and then when you photograph it, it wouldn't be present in the photo where it could have been there in the original.
Are errors made in your laboratory during testing?
I think errors are a fact of life. Everyone makes errors.
Are errors made in the diagnostic and clinical work in your laboratory?
Errors are made. We do everything we can to prevent errors, and I can't say that we've never made an error.
I have never made an error.
They are a fact of life.
Well, some of the techniques that you use or have used in your laboratory have a certain error rate, don't they?
Yes.
You've tested for HIV in your laboratory in the past, correct?
Yes.
And do you currently test for HIV?
Yes.
Incidentally, does HIV cause AIDS?
I guess that's a controversial question.
I think he testified to that yesterday. It's in the record.
It's HIV is the
Doctor,
prominent
hold
consensus
on,
is it does
hold on,
cause AIDS.
Hold on. Let's move on to something else.
Very well. As far as this HIV testing in your laboratory, have there been sort of two phases to that HIV testing using PCR?
I'm not sure what you're getting at.
Okay. As far as HIV testing, how do you conduct that testing, just in terms of the technology used?
Well, at the present time, for the purpose of screening donors, if that's what you're asking about, we use what's called a serological technique, which
Okay, and
is looking at antibodies as opposed to looking at DNA.
in broad terms, would that be comparable as far as the broad technology to the serology testing conducted by the Los Angeles Police Department in this case?
I guess so.
As far as that testing, did that then lead to a different form or different method of testing for HIV in your laboratory?
Well, it didn't really lead to it. It's just that that particular way of looking for a virus is to look directly at the nucleic acid, which is the infectious part of the virus.
All right, so we can refer to one method as an indirect method and one method as a direct method?
Correct.
As far as the indirect method, what error rate did that method have as used in your laboratory?
Well, any of these are basically tests that are clinical diagnostic kits, and before those are released for that purpose in any laboratory, the FDA goes through validation studies that define what is known as the specificity and sensitivity of a test kit. And the specificity means how specific is it to what you're looking for. That is, do you only detect AIDS, or maybe in certain clinical situations might you get a false indication that it isn't, it's positive but it really isn't AIDS. And as far as sensitivity, it says how many people who are infected are truly identified as being infected. So in any one of the aspects of any test, any laboratory test, is that none of them are perfect. And what you need to do is identify the parameters and the guidelines that allow you to weight to determine how much weight to put on that test. So we used that kit, and the error rate that is reported for that kit, I think the original kit was probably 98% specific and 98 or 99% sensitive.
Isn't it correct that the earlier method, the indirect method, had an error rate of between 10 and 15%?
I don't believe it was that high
Haven't you
for
previously,
HIV.
haven't you previously testified that the error rate for the earlier technique was between 10 and 15%?
I believe I was talking about, I may have been talking about HCV there, not HIV.
I'm sorry, HCV?
The
What is
early
it?
kits on that had a higher false positive rate, and it has to do with the fact that you're looking for a virus that's found very infrequently in the population, so it's called low incidence, and that creates a problem in terms of this false positive situation.
Is an error rate of 10 to 15% in your view acceptable?
No.
Let's move to the newer form of HIV testing. That is the direct method? Is that
Yes.
the term that we can use?
Yes.
Does it have an error rate also?
There is no FDA-approved test for that, so there's nothing published in terms of what that rate is. I'm sure it will have an error rate.
Haven't you determined in your own lab that with regard to this second form of HIV testing that you encountered an error rate of between 2 and 5%?
For PCR testing?
Correct.
No, we haven't measured an error rate.
Have you in fact encountered an error rate of between 2 and 5% for any of your testing in your laboratory that you use, that is techniques used in casework?
I think you can find blind trials, for instance, of PCR testing, where error rates for detecting viruses are that high, or perhaps.
And are these techniques that are still used in casework?
They are used, and what you need to know is what that error rate is. The important thing is knowing the error rate so that you can look at whatever the data is and properly evaluate how much weight to put onto it based on what your probability of making a mistake is.
In other words, with an error rate of, let's say, 1 to 2%, that's a portion of what a doctor may use in counseling a patient about whether that patient has a disease or not.
They take that into consideration, or should take that into consideration. If a test result doesn't seem to fit with their clinical impression, they would retest.
All right. Dr. Gerdes, I'm going to ask to shift your attention to the DQ alpha marker. I think we spoke a little bit about it earlier. It's your opinion, isn't it, that there is absolutely nothing scientifically suspect about the DQ alpha gene?
Nothing about the gene, no.
How many laboratories are testing for DQ alpha in forensics, to your knowledge?
I'm sure there are on the order of 100 or more.
You've actually personally, that is your laboratory, looked at the DQ alpha marker. I believe you described that yesterday.
With the direct dot blot, yes. Not with this kit.
By the other dot blotting method?
Yes.
Your laboratory does more work with this other marker closely related called DQ beta, correct?
Correct.
And is that because it has more different forms than DQ alpha does?
It's more polymorphic, and it's more relevant to the reason we look for it, which is for matching in transplants.
In other words, for your purposes, DQ beta is more informative in your laboratory than DQ alpha because it gives you more information about what you're in particular looking for.
Correct.
Your experience as far as DQ alpha is concerned comes primarily from cases that you've looked at in your role as a defense consultant, correct?
In terms of this kit, yes.
You've never used the kit, correct?
That's correct.
And I'm referring to the kit manufactured by Roche or developed by Roche, marketed by PerkinElmer, used by all 3 laboratories in this case, correct?
Correct.
Cellmark, Department of Justice, and the LAPD.
Correct.
To your knowledge, is this kit being used around the world in forensic analysis?
I believe it's being used in other countries.
Now, you expressed the fact that you're familiar with the user guide, is that right?
Yes.
And is that, I think we've brought this up before, does it look something like what I have entitled Amplotype User Guide?
That looks like the cover, yes.
And is that something that one can obtain from Perkin-Elmer
Yes,
to act as a guide in conducting this test?
that's correct.
In your opinion, that is a good guide, isn't that your opinion?
I believe in general, there are certain specific areas of it that I disagree with, but in general, it's a good guide.
Are there any publications, to your knowledge, scientific publications, showing that the use of the Roche kit, DQ alpha kit, is unreliable?
There are no publications that will specifically conclude that it's totally unreliable. There are numbers of publications that discuss the contamination issues and other issues we brought up.
Do you use kits in your laboratory typing? Any kits?
We use clinical kits, yes.
Is the use of kits in a clinical laboratory common?
It is.
Do you, in fact, use a kit in your own laboratory developed and manufactured by Roche?
The chlamydia kit, yes.
There are in this user guide, actually let's talk about two things. First, the user guide itself. It contains protocols on how to conduct PCR DQ alpha typing, correct?
Yes, it's sort of the cookbook, if you will.
There's also a second item that comes with the kit, correct? And it's a different document from this user guide.
The package insert?
What's the package insert?
Oh, that's it comes with the kit, and it's pretty much an abbreviated version of this larger user guide. It also describes more succinctly how you would set up the test.
In other words, it's also a cookbook, but it's kind of directly relevant to how to do each step.
Yes.
It's your opinion, is it not, that the user guide and the package insert describe correct scientific procedures for this test?
The procedures for setting it up are certainly, I agree with those.
All right, would this be an appropriate time, Ron?
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our recess for the lunch hour. Dr. Gerdes, you can step down.
Please keep the noise down.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, please remember all of my admonitions to you. Don't discuss this case amongst yourselves. Don't form any opinions about the case. Don't conduct any deliberations until the matter has been submitted to you. Don't allow anybody to communicate with you with regard to the case. We'll stand in recess for an hour and a half until 1:30, and at that time we'll take up the Stockdale issue, the motion. All right? All right, have a nice lunch. We'll see you back at 1:30. All right, back on the record in the Simpson matter. All parties are again present. Jury is not present. All right, this is let's have it quiet in the courtroom, please. This is a motion to compel the defense to produce an audio cassette from one Gretchen Stockdale for inspection and copying. All right, I'll hear from the people.
I think that I'd like to save the court some time. The court has read our moving papers. If I may, I'd like to waive my first argument to the court and respond to Mr. Yeoman's argument. That's acceptable.
All right.
Well, Your Honor, what we have here is a tempest in a teapot, I think, but there is an important principle at stake, and the principle involves the continuous efforts of the prosecution to push this concept of reciprocal discovery beyond the constitutional limits and turn the defense into agents or investigators for the prosecution. What we have here is, in the normal course of investigation of the defense case, an interview of a witness by the name of Gretchen Stockdale, who informed us last September that on the evening of June 12th, she received a telephone message on her message machine from the defendant, from Mr. Simpson, at 7:35 p.m. The message has been reproduced in a word-for-word transcript in the New York Daily News. The message was simply a call from Mr. Simpson indicating, "Hey, Gretchen, sweetheart, it's Orenthal James, who is finally at a place in his life where he is like totally unattached with everybody," and then a laugh. In any event, I've got a Sunday evening. I guess I'm catching a red eye at midnight or something to Chicago, but I'll be back Monday night. If you leave me a message, leave it on, and then leaving a telephone number to call back. So, of course, we knew of this prior to trial. We asked Ms. Stockdale for a copy of the message, and she gave us a cassette tape on which she had copied the message, but she retained the original telephone mini cassette, and we were led to believe that what we had was simply a copy of what she still had on her recording message machine. The contemplation of the defense was actually at one point to call Ms. Stockdale as a defense witness, because we regard this, of course, as exculpatory evidence, that at 7:30 on the night of the homicide, Mr. Simpson is calling a lady friend to see if she's available to get together. That certainly murder or mayhem was not on his mind when he made that telephone call. We decided not to use this in our case in chief, so of course there was no obligation to turn any of this material over. The reciprocal discovery law simply requires us to turn over the evidence we intend to present at trial and the statements of the witnesses we intend to call at trial. And we did not intend and do not intend to call Gretchen Stockdale as a witness. Now, the prosecution learned of the existence of Ms. Stockdale and learned of the existence of this telephone message before they rested their case, and they apparently decided not to use it either. So the request at this point in the trial for the production of this tape is somewhat of a mystery. Number one, it certainly doesn't come under the reciprocal discovery law. This is not evidence that we are required to produce under the reciprocal discovery law, and I think they concede that in their moving papers. The only authority they rely on to require the production of this tape is Sanchez and Meredith, which deal with the defense's obligation not to conceal inculpatory evidence from the prosecution. Sanchez involved literally a written confession by the defendant and a murder checklist, highly incriminating and inculpatory evidence that the defense took possession of and concededly knew when they were taking possession of it that they then had the only copies available. And their retention of that evidence would have deprived the prosecution of any access to that evidence. Here, of course, we have evidence that is available. They know of Ms. Stockdale's existence. They have available an accurate transcription of the tape. It's too late to call her. It certainly does not appear relevant as any sort of rebuttal at this point, so it's not even at this point any longer admissible evidence. But even if it were, it is readily available to the prosecution. So on that basis, we would contend we have no obligation to preserve or to produce this evidence for the prosecution. If we did, then Your Honor would have to say that everything that the defense has in its possession that we're not going to put on in our case that we think might be of some conceivable use to the prosecution, we should now turn over so we can help strengthen their case. And that's not the point of reciprocal discovery.
Thank you, Mr. Ullman. Ms. Clark. I'm most concerned about the fact that Ms. Stockdale has apparently been known to both sides for a considerable period of time, certainly prior to the prosecution arresting, and that what the defense has in its possession is a copy, not the original.
That's not the information we have, Your Honor. We did, in fact, speak to Ms. Stockdale in June. I don't know what exactly was known to the prosecution about her involvement with the defendant or the tape. I myself only learned of the tape very recently, its existence.
Well,
Nevertheless,
the problem is that the transcript of the tape was published in the New York Daily News in mid-May of 1995.
Yeah, I'm aware of that, Your Honor, but the transcript, a cold transcript, cannot tell the prosecution what's the tone of voice, how it sounds, where the call is made from, which might be very telling.
Well, the issue is, when were you aware of it, and is this the original?
Yes, Your Honor. No, it's... First of all, the information we have from Ms. Stockdale is that they have the original. She turned it over to Mr. Pavlik and has no copy with her anymore. So there's no way for the people to get it except through the defense because they have the only one. And that is what she told our investigator. We have that report attached to our moving papers. So there is no other way for us to get it. Now, furthermore, whether we knew of it or not, the defense had the obligation to turn this over. And let me explain why, Your Honor. I'm very troubled by defense counsel's characterization of his duties regarding discovery. The discovery obligations that the defense has with respect to this issue are framed most appropriately under People v. Meredith, not Sanchez, and not Prop 115. The defense is not required to act as our agents. That's clear, and no one argues to the contrary. But when physical evidence comes into the possession of the defense and thereby alters it, either by reason of its location, its discoverability, or its condition, they are required to put the people in the same position as if they had not altered it by any of those means. By taking into his possession the tape that Ms. Stockdale had, Mr. Pavlik altered the condition by means of its location and made it undiscoverable by the people.
Oh,
By no
yes,
means of
Salty,
investigation could we
yes.
ever have obtained that, other than the means we are attempting to use through this court, which is a discovery motion. It is in their possession. Were there some other means of getting a hold of it, we would have done so. But we have been prevented from doing so. And under People versus Meredith, the defense is now required to put us back into that same position, by the very least, giving it back to Ms. Stockdale. I submit that Mr. Pavlik should come into court and divulge the whereabouts of that tape. But certainly, we are not to be put in a position of having the tape be rendered undiscoverable by the fact that the defense has kept it and secreted it. Now, counsel has an interesting take on what the obligations of defense counsel are in saying, if it's exculpatory, therefore I don't have to turn it over. If we accept that proposition, Your Honor, then all the defense has to do to avoid their obligation is say, well, but it's exculpatory. We don't have to turn it over. Well, that's true. The murderer wrote a letter admitting that he killed her, but, we don't have to turn it over because we think it's exculpatory. It shows evidence of mental insanity or a mental defense, so therefore it's exculpatory. I mean, you can see how you can take that sort of thing to its logical extreme, at which point they'd have no obligation under Meredith at all.
But fundamentally, the bottom line here that I have to know before I can rule on this, is this the original or is it a copy? The report from Dana Thompson indicates in a hearsay declaration, in fact, it's a report, it's not even a declaration, that Ms. Stockdale indicated to him on June the 12th that the,
21st, wasn't it?
June 21st, that the copy that was given to Mr. Pavlik was the only copy of that tape, or the only tape recording in her possession of that
Right.
phone call. What I've heard from Mr. Ullman is that, no, this is a copy of a microcassette,
We had
which some phone machines are and some machines aren't. So
Right.
I have two hearsay statements that are in conflict with each other factually. If
Assume
what
for-
Mr. Ullman says that all they have is a copy that was given to them and you have equal access to the same source, then his side wins. If you're correct that this is the only tape recording of that conversation, then you're right. It is real evidence, and under Meredith, you're entitled to it. I agree. But I have a factual dispute here that I can't resolve.
But, Your Honor, why would we bring a motion before the court if we had equal access to it? Why bother? We don't need this. We don't need to file more paper. We've killed enough trees in this case. The court has heard from us enough through oral argument that we don't need to wear out our welcome further. There would be no reason to bring this motion if we had equal access. We want to hear the tape. And the truth of the matter is we can't because we can't get it. And because the defense has it.
No, but the point I'm making is that I have a I have a factual dispute that all I have before me are a hearsay statement from you and a representation from counsel that is contradictory. So that's what I got.
Then we're going to have a hearing?
It looks that way.
Darn. Okay.
But
Would you
Ms.
call in?
Stockdale is available.
Yes. Yes. Okay. When would you like it, Your Honor?
I
Ms.
would only add, Your Honor, that you have two other things. You know that the availability of the information from Ms. Stockdale was equally available to the prosecution. They have the record showing the telephone call made on June 12th. They could have gone to Ms. Stockdale just as we did. And we also know that the Daily News was apparently able to obtain a tape and report a verbatim transcript of this telephone call. So there must be another copy out there somewhere.
Must be.
It must be, but if we can't get our hands on it, then what good does that do?
Well,
We got to find out.
have you served Ms. Stockdale with an SDT
I believe
or a
that
subpoena?
this was an issue that we conferred on, and I believe that we have. I believe that we have, Your Honor. We conferred about what would be the best method to try and elicit this from her, and I believe we filed an SDT, and then we brought the motion before the court because that was not successful. I think what we'll do is,
This hearing will take all of 10 minutes.
I'm informed, Your Honor, that she told us when we served the SDT on her that she did not have it. So this hearing would take less than 10 minutes.
10 minutes, all right.
All right. So when would you like to
Mr.
do it?
Ullman, when are you going to be available?
I'll be back next Tuesday, Your Honor.
Tuesday it
Before
is.
the calendar, some hearings for Tuesday afternoon.
What time would you like, Your Honor?
Well, either before or after on Tuesday.
Sounds great.
Like I say, this is a factual determination.
Right.
Where's the original tape?
Right.
Right.
Right. It should be very simple. I'll get Ms. Stockdale.
All right, since we all agree it's a simple factual issue, let's move on to the jury.
Thank you.
All right. Deputy McNair?
One 1.25.
Seated. All All right, let the record reflect we've been rejoined by all the members of our jury panel. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Gerdes, would you resume the witness stand, please? All right, the record should reflect Dr. John Gerdes is on the witness stand undergoing cross-examination by Mr. Clark. Good afternoon again, Doctor.
Good afternoon.
You're reminded, sir, you were still under oath, and Mr. Clark, you may continue with your cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon again, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Gerdes, just going back for a moment if I can, you described this morning how, as far as your paternity testing in your lab, that you used databases to calculate some numbers to describe how rare a match is between an alleged father, let's say, and a child, correct?
You're using a different type of statistics, that's correct.
As far as that method is concerned, do you use databases to make that calculation?
Yes.
Where are the databases from that you use in your laboratory for that purpose?
The database we use is obtained from Life Codes.
Is Life Codes a forensic laboratory?
They do forensic testing, yes.
Do you use any other databases other than those from Life Codes?
We have our own database as well, but we generally use a Life Codes-based database.
Now, I'd like to shift your attention, if I could, to polymarker that we discussed a little bit earlier this morning. Polymarker consists of more than one genetic marker, is that right?
That's correct.
And how many does it consist of?
5.
As far as this polymarker is concerned, is it also a test that's used using a kit?
Yes, it is.
And does Roche, in fact, manufacture, or through Perkin-Elmer market, the particular kit that's used to type the polymarkers?
They do.
As far as your own personal experience, have you used that particular polymarker kit?
We haven't used it for any casework, but I have had an occasion to run one kit's worth, which is 100 samples.
So you've used one kit and you've run 100 samples through the polymarkers.
Yeah, I'm not even sure we ran all of them, but we've run at least half that amount, I would say.
So something less than 100 samples.
Yes, something less than 100.
Does that constitute then your personal familiarity with the polymarker kit?
As far as actually running it, yes.
You haven't done any other testing using any other techniques for these 5 genetic markers, have you, other than
No.
the one time with the kit?
No.
As far as presentations, and this would be lectures, have you attended any lectures or presentations reporting information about validating the use of the polymarker in forensics?
I haven't attended any lectures or meetings. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, any presentations?
No.
This particular set of 5 genetic markers, are they all amplified at the same time using this thermal cycler, the machine that actually copies the DNA over and over again?
Yes.
Is there anything unique about that to forensics as far as multiplying more than one marker at the same time?
It's done with genetic applications as well.
So in other words, this amplifying a number of markers at the same time is actually also used in disease diagnosis, correct?
Yes.
And that would be a clinical use?
Yes.
As far as these markers themselves, are they simply 5 more genetic markers that are used to type samples in a forensic case?
Yes.
In other words, there's nothing unique about them in comparison to DQ alpha.
Other than they're a different genes.
And then in that same vein, I'd like to turn your attention to D1S80. Have you ever tested that particular marker in your laboratory?
No.
Have you bought or used the kit? Well, let me rephrase that. As far as this particular marker, is it also tested in kit form commonly?
Yes.
And is that again another kit marketed by Perkin-Elmer, manufactured by Roche?
It is.
Have you ever bought or used that particular kit?
No.
Is that again simply another marker that's available for use in terms of being another particular genetic marker in addition to DQ alpha and the 5 polymarkers?
Yes.
Is there anything unique about D1S80 that makes it a good or bad marker?
That particular marker is a little different. It doesn't use the dot blot detection methodology. It's a little different detection, and that's the only major difference.
So in other words, the way that the marker is actually typed is a little bit different than DQ alpha and the polymarkers, right?
That's correct.
Is it actually read, and you may have read testimony and descriptions of D1S80 results, is it actually read a little more like the RFLP method?
It is.
And there's nothing wrong with utilizing that particular method of telling different types than instead using, let's say, a dot blotting technique.
Wrong, vague questions.
Sustain or rephrase the question.
As far as typing D1S80 by this method that's more like RFLP typing, is there anything unreliable about that technique?
All of these are, again, the point is that they're all PCR-based tests. They're all susceptible to the dangers of, because of the sensitivity of the test.
Well, just referring you now to the way that it's typed, setting aside your concerns that you've expressed, is there anything different about typing it by the more RFLT type, P-type banding pattern method versus simply dot blotting it?
Well, it's different. There's nothing wrong with it if that's what you're, as far as that type of detection system.
Have you ever, and you have described, let me ask one question first. You've described the fact that in your laboratory you use, was it FDA-approved tests?
The clinical testing, the majority of them are FDA approved, yes.
Okay. Is there anything about FDA approval that means you either can or can't use it in a clinical setting?
The regulation is in terms of being able to market a kit for the purpose of clinical testing. The FDA, a clinical lab can run a test that's not FDA approved. They have to just do their own validation and satisfy CLIA that that's been done.
Do you do any testing in your laboratory using techniques that are not FDA approved?
Yes,
For example, what?
the CMV test for PCR.
And this is a test that you use in casework with samples that come into the lab to determine whether the CMV virus is present at sufficient levels that some medical danger may exist.
That's correct.
Are there any other tests that you use in your laboratory that are not FDA approved?
None that come to mind at the moment.
I don't believe I've asked, as far as the CMV testing itself, what percentage roughly of the casework in your laboratory does it constitute?
You mean in terms of HLA and everything else?
Yes, of casework.
Less than 10%.
Is it your testimony that unless a test is FDA approved, it shouldn't be used?
No, the point behind FDA approval is it's generally considered as the ultimate validation for a clinical-based test. It doesn't mean that testing can't be done just because it isn't FDA approved.
And as far as the forensic tests used in this case, they don't have FDA approval, correct?
The FDA does not approve forensic-based testing.
The absence of that FDA approval does not mean that the tests are unreliable simply because they don't have FDA approval, correct?
That's correct.
Is it correct, Dr. Gerdes, that one general measure of scientific acceptability of a test is the number of labs who are using the technology and cross-checking one another?
That's one way of looking at it.
Is it also correct that another measure of scientific acceptability of a test is the number of publications that have stated in fact that the test is reliable and it can be reproduced?
That would be one aspect.
Are you aware of any publications that demonstrate that if
That could
properly
be one
used,
aspect.
the DQ alpha typing kit produces proper, accurate, and reliable results on forensic samples?
There are publications in the forensic literature that state that.
Are you aware of any publications that demonstrate to the contrary?
As I mentioned earlier, there are numerous publications that deal with and discuss
Only the ones
the
he wrote.
contamination issues, the sensitivity issues that we've gone over a number of times here. None of them will have come straight out and said that you shouldn't use the kit.
Are there any publications demonstrating the scientific unacceptability of using the polymarker kit in forensic samples?
No.
Are there any publications demonstrating the fact that use of the D1S80 typing kit produces unreliable and inaccurate results?
Again, there are numerous publications that discuss the problems. None of them come right out and say you shouldn't use the kit.
I'd like to talk with you a moment about peer review. You're familiar with the term peer review?
Yes.
What does peer review mean?
It's a process where if you are going to publish an article, the article is sent to a number of reviewers who are your peers, that is, people who have an equivalent training, and they will evaluate that, criticize it, make suggestions, and before the article can be published, it has to be approved by a majority of those peers.
The peer review process is an important one as far as scientific literature, correct?
It's important in academics.
Is it in fact one of the ways the scientific community validates a technique to determine its accuracy and reliability?
Not necessarily. I mean, you're not validating the technique. You're just basically cross-checking with a number of your peers to see if your statements are defensible scientifically.
Doesn't this publication process allow other scientists to look at the findings of scientists who publish this material to be able to evaluate whether or not a technique in fact should be used?
The publication usually is not strictly being offered for the purpose of a flat statement that a particular thing can be used. I mean, it's generally a scientific documentation of observations.
Incidentally, I'm sorry.
And the peers will look at those observations and see if they have been analyzed in a scientific manner and whether the conclusions are reasonable.
You mentioned the fact that there were publications that talk about contamination involving PCR, correct?
Yes.
Those publications serve as warnings to individuals who perform the typing process so that they can incorporate what that publication is showing into their own wealth of knowledge. Is that correct?
Well, it depends on the publication. That's too general of a statement. There are publications which are just blind trials, if you will, where on PCR, where the kit was sent, and then there was an observation of contamination. It was simply reported that so many labs had contamination.
Are you, in your opinion, familiar with the DQ alpha forensic typing literature?
Yes,
That is extensive, isn't it?
fairly, yes.
Dr. Gerdes, are you familiar with a book entitled PCR Technology?
Yes.
And are you familiar with who the editor of that book is?
I believe it's Henry Ehrlich.
Who is Henry Ehrlich?
Henry Ehrlich is an individual who was at CETUS at the time this technology was being developed at that particular company, and has done work in the area of HLA
And HLA
typing.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
HLA typing.
HLA again includes not only DQ alpha, but also at least one of the markers typed in your laboratory.
Yes, that whole
Absolutely
gene complex.
true.
Have you read that book?
Salty, that is
read
so true.
most of it.
There is a chapter in that book entitled Applications of PCR to the Analysis of Biological Evidence. Are you familiar with that?
Yes,
Have you read that chapter?
yes.
Do you recall who the authors of that chapter are?
I believe Henry Ehrlich is one of the authors, if you're referring to the same one. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Yes. I don't recall the other authors.
Is Cecilia von Berldingen an author to your knowledge?
That's, yes,
And Russell Higuchi,
yes,
George Sensabaugh,
yes,
and Edward Blake.
yes.
With regard to that article, in your view, is that an article demonstrating the validity of PCR forensic typing using the DQ alpha marker?
I think it discusses the issues. I don't think it justifies the validity based on that article. It's basically a review article.
Okay. Does it discuss, in fact, the uses of PCR to type samples using markers including DQ alpha?
It does.
Are you also familiar with an article entitled Polymerase Chain Reaction, PCR, Amplification and Human Leukocyte Antigen, Oligonucleotide Typing on Biological Evidence Samples Casework Experience?
Yes, I'm familiar with that.
And you've read that particular publication?
That's Ed Blake's article, correct?
Yes. Are there other authors as well?
Yes.
And do you rely on that article in terms of any of the opinions that you've offered in this court?
No.
Do you, in fact, reject what's written in that particular publication?
I consider that publication a one-sided slant on the cases. It discusses a number of cases, several of which I've been involved with, where there were highly contested issues which are not discussed in that article.
Dr. Gerdes, with regard to these publications about DQ alpha, and again, there are a large number of them, correct?
Yes.
Do you rely on any of those publications that, in fact, demonstrate this reliability of the DQ alpha typing process?
I'm familiar with those publications. I think it's a misstatement to say I rely upon them.
Well, do you, in fact, reject their findings about reliability?
I accept their observations of problems and discussions of those in certain instances. I disagree with certain other statements. And I disagree with their conclusions in some instances. It's very general. You'd have to take them one at a time.
Okay. Are you familiar with a publication entitled DNA Typing from Single Hairs
Yes,
by Russell Higuchi and other authors as well?
yes,
And have you read that particular publication?
yes, I have.
In terms of its findings of reliability, do you reject the author's conclusions?
Well, that particular paper is simply a demonstration paper. It's a paper that the overall bottom line is that it shows that it's possible to obtain a DNA result on a single hair. And that part of the paper I don't disagree with. That certainly is possible. It doesn't discuss the difficulties that there would be in taking that technology and using it on a routine basis in crime scenes.
Are you familiar with a publication entitled Genetic Markers in Human Bone 1, Deoxyribonucleic Acid DNA Analysis by Henry Lee and others?
I'm familiar with that.
Have you read that publication?
Yes,
Do the authors of that publication include individuals at Cellmark Diagnostics?
I believe so.
Does the name George Heron sound familiar?
Yes.
And to your knowledge, was that individual, Mr. Heron, Dr. Heron, actually at Cellmark Diagnostics at one time?
I believe so.
Are you familiar with the name Dr. Daniel Garner?
Yes.
Who is he?
He's, I'm not sure what his exact title is. He's from the FBI and is involved in the DNA, the Department of DNA Testing or whatever they call their department.
Actually, Dr. Garner is at Cellmark Diagnostics, is he not?
I'm sorry, I'm thinking of, yes, okay.
With respect to this publication, do you reject Dr. Lee and the other authors' conclusions about the reliability of DQ alpha typing?
Again, I mean, that is a demonstration paper that shows that you can use this technique under controlled conditions to identify individuals based on bone. It doesn't discuss the general problems that can occur, the routine application in labs, and it doesn't discuss the aspects of determining whether a specific laboratory may have significant contamination problems, which would render those demonstrations of capability invalid.
One more, if I might, Dr. Gerdes. Are you familiar with a publication by the Federal Bureau of Investigation entitled Validation Studies on the Analysis of the HLA DQ alpha locus using the polymerase chain reaction by Dr. Comey and Dr. Bruce Badoli?
I'm familiar with that.
Have you read that particular publication?
I have.
That publication deals with reliability of DQ alpha typing, correct?
It does.
That publication also deals with contamination and its effects on typing using forensic samples.
Yeah, again, it's a demonstration paper. What they dealt with in that paper in terms of contamination is that one experiment where 5 tubes were opened on a bench top. They scratched their head over the tubes, closed them up, showed there was no contamination. That's a demonstration. Demonstrates that under those limited number of samples, they did not get contamination. From that, they conclude that contamination is not an issue. That I disagree with.
We have just discussed approximately 5 publications, is that right?
Yes.
There are many more, are there not?
Yes, and most of them are, as I said, demonstration papers that show under controlled conditions in specific instances in particular laboratories it's possible to obtain a type.
The last article that Mr. Clark referred to, I believe, has an exhibit number. It came up in the testimony of Mr. Sims, and I don't have it right here, but I think it would clarify the record if we could identify it by that number so that we can flag it with the other testimony.
It's identified by its title and authors.
Dr. Gerdes, you referred to these largely as demonstration papers, is that correct?
That's what I consider them.
Have you ever done such a demonstration paper as far as this particular forensic area of typing is concerned?
No, I haven't published in the forensic area.
Now, I'd like to shift your attention, if I could, to the polymarkers. I believe we discussed those a few moments ago. As far as that particular set of 5 genetic markers, there are similar publications, are there not, in the scientific literature?
There are similar demonstration papers. It's a newer system, so there are fewer in number.
Are you familiar, for example, with a publication entitled Evaluation of the Amplotype PM DNA Test System on Forensic Case Samples?
Who's the author on that?
George Heron, Nicola Fields, and Rebecca Reynolds.
Yes, I'm familiar with that article.
Incidentally, PM, is that short for polymarker?
Yes.
And with respect to that article, have you read it?
Yes.
With respect to this article also, do you reject its findings and conclusions about reliability of the PM typing system?
I believe they did 16 samples there. It's a demonstration paper, and it's interesting that in one of those 16 samples they had a chance match.
Is this another paper that you consider a demonstration paper?
Yes.
In your
Amy,
opinion, is
please
this a paper
don't
then
stop.
that does not demonstrate
Please.
the accuracy and reliability
You're doing great.
of using the polymarker typing kit on forensic case samples?
Well, I think the analogy here that might clarify this whole thing is basically if you have a clinical kit that someone is using, there may have been some publication as far as the use of that kit, but the ultimate test of any kit, of any method, is how it's used in the field. It's just like products. Just because you put a product on the market and someone says that's a good product, it doesn't mean it's a good product until you've had a chance to look at a large number of individuals who use that product, and if it starts to have flaws, those become apparent. And it's a similar thing in forensics or anything else.
What about when many laboratories use the technique and they reach the same conclusions as the authors? Does your opinion still hold true under those circumstances?
In my opinion, we haven't reached that stage where there's been enough testimony and discussion and in-depth analysis of the specific problem of contamination and how that can create errors in a blinded fashion in the forensic community.
In your view, courtroom testimony is important in establishing scientific validity?
In my view, that's like the Consumer Report. It's what How is it working in the field? We've done these demonstration papers that say it's possible. Now we put it out into the field. We put it out on the market. How's it working? What's the feedback from the consumer?
I'm sorry, can I have a moment, Your Honor? Incidentally, when you referred, Dr. Gerdes, to the first Polymarket article, the one we just discussed, as being 7 laboratories, were you speaking of a different publication?
Excuse me?
When you referred to this paper by George Heron et al. On evaluation of the PM system, were you
Yes.
mistaking that one paper for another, as far as the 7 laboratories?
This, if you can let me look at the paper, I can answer that question.
I would ask now that these be marked so that we can know which ones they are.
Why don't you show it? Why don't you show it?
They've shunted with us.
Can I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
No, that's the paper I was referring to.
All right.
In terms of the false match, you mean?
I'm sorry?
In terms of the false match?
No, you mentioned 7 laboratories.
No, I didn't.
All right.
I said several.
Oh, several, I'm sorry. All right. Are you also familiar with a publication entitled Consistency and Reproducibility
I'm not a
of
scientist
Amplified
either,
PM
but I
Results
am
between
too.
7 laboratories field trial results
I'm familiar with that.
by Nicola Fields and Rebecca Reynolds again?
Yes.
Have you read that document?
Yes.
And do you reject its conclusions about reliability of the PM typing system,
Again, it's a demonstration paper.
as you've used the term earlier?
Yes.
And lastly, in this area, are you familiar with Amplitype PM and HLA DQ alpha typing from pap smear, semen smear, and post-coital slides by Rena Roy, Dr. Rena Roy, and Dr. Rebecca Reynolds?
Can I see that?
Sure.
I don't believe I've seen this paper.
All right. To your knowledge, other than the publications that I've just described, are there others demonstrating the reliability of PM typing on forensic samples?
There are other demonstration papers that with regard to the use of the polymarker system.
As you've used that term.
Yes.
Can you tell us approximately how many laboratories type the polymarkers in forensic casework?
There are probably hundreds of labs. I don't know an exact figure.
I'm sorry, hundreds?
Yes.
Incidentally, all of the publications that I've shown you or described the title that we've discussed, with the exception of the last one that you're unfamiliar with, they are all from peer-reviewed scientific publications, correct?
That's correct.
And actually, the last particular publication I showed you was also from a peer-reviewed publication. Is
Yes.
that correct? And then lastly, with regard to the D1S80 system, are you familiar with similar publications demonstrating the reliability of that particular marker's use in forensics?
There are similar demonstration papers discussing the capability of that system to produce a type.
Without going through each of them, would your answers then be the same with regard to those publications, that they are in fact demonstration papers only?
Yes.
No, you have to go through
In your
each
view,
of
they
them.
in no manner establish the reliability of D1S80 typing on forensic casework.
They do not.
We
As I
deserve it.
mentioned before, my
Each
opinion is
page,
the
each one.
product has to be used to an adequate degree and evaluated in a critical manner, in a critical blinded manner, before you can really determine the errors that are possible with the system.
Can you give us an estimate, for instance, how many cases you think DQ alpha typing has been used in forensic casework just in this country?
I'm not aware of how many. I'm sure it's probably in the hundreds.
With, and I believe you described earlier, over 100 laboratories use the technique. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
so it's probably even in the thousands.
Isn't it more likely in the many thousands?
I'm-
I don't believe I asked you about D1S80. Are you familiar with approximately how many laboratories use it in casework?
Again, that's a newer system. It would be fewer than the DQ alpha, but most of the labs who have set up PCR for one system are fairly rapidly add the next one.
As far as all of these markers, DQ alpha, polymarker, and D1S80, is it correct that there have been many presentations about their use in forensic casework? And I'm referring to meetings, lectures, symposia, and so forth.
Yes.
That's a fairly common event. Let me rephrase that, if I may. That's a fairly common manner of the scientific community discussing work, whether in forensics or clinical work. That is, presentations and symposia.
Yes.
Do those presentations, conferences, and symposia play an important role in not only disseminating but also discussing scientific techniques?
Yes.
With regard to polymarker and D1S80 and DQ alpha, have you attended any such meetings?
No.
You've described how the DQ alpha marker was the first marker used following PCR amplification in forensics, correct?
Correct.
Are you aware of when that began? When was the first case using PCR DQ alpha?
I know when the kit was released approximately, which was in 1990. And I believe that there was a single individual doing typing probably 3-4 years before that.
Would 1986 be approximately the time of this individual doing that work?
That might be the case. PCR was first published in 1985.
I'm sorry.
So, and this individual happened to be working in the same area where that method was developed.
Who was that individual?
Ed Blake.
Is it correct, or it is correct, isn't it, that when you add more markers, in other words, from DQ alpha adding additional markers like PM and D1S80, that adding of more markers allows the analyst to cross-check results on individual samples?
It allows cross-checking as long as you have totally ruled out the possibility of cross-contamination. Because in the case of cross-contamination, remember, you can look at as many markers as you want to, and the error is caused by that physical cross-transfer, and therefore that type of contamination would not be detected.
Like your clinical use, where more markers provide you more information, isn't it also true that adding more markers in a forensic context increases the probabilities that a sample came from one person to the exclusion of others?
That's true.
You have previously said you would like to see more forensic markers added to DQ alpha, correct?
I think it does add to the capability of detecting the other types of contaminants, which are the contaminants due to amplification product carryover, for instance.
In other words, by adding additional markers, you increase your chances of detecting contamination.
That's true.
And you so testified in 1990 about it would be good if more markers were added to DQ alpha.
That's true.
Since that time, 6 additional markers have been added that are routinely used in forensic casework, correct?
Correct.
Those 6 markers that were added to DQ alpha were all used in this case, is that right?
That's correct. Since that time, it's become more abundantly obvious to me that the type of cross-contamination
Well, I'm sorry,
is an
objection,
equal
move to
problem.
strike, Your Honor.
Non-responsive. You're right. Stricken.
As you add more markers, don't you increase the ability to resolve ambiguities or uncertainties about typing results?
You increase the capability of resolving ambiguities due to amplification carryover, that kind of contamination, yes.
Incidentally, you've described in your laboratory about the use of PCR with some samples and also using other techniques, serologic techniques.
We do both kinds of techniques in our lab, yes.
Well, what I'm really directing my question to is, are there any samples that you use PCR with that you also type using serologic techniques?
Yes.
Why do you use both of those tests on a given sample?
Well, for the specific cases I'm thinking of, they give you different information. So, for instance, if I want to look at a serological marker for cytomegalovirus, that tells me which individual is at higher risk of having this virus become a problem after they receive their transplant. Someone who has antibody to that.
Technique as a cross-check in any manner.
Not at the present time.
Was that true in the past?
No.
As far as this use of multiple markers, and you've described the fact that in this case, at least with the many samples, 7 PCR markers were used, correct?
Yes.
Is it correct that serologic techniques that are also used on a given sample, that also adds more markers to act as a cross-check, doesn't it?
Well, you're really, again, you're looking at something different. You're looking at an antibody which tells you, if we're talking about an infectious agent, that tells you that that person had been exposed in the past. If they are antibody positive, let's take HIV as an example. If they are antibody positive, and then you were to do a PCR and you found the presence of the genome of HIV, then that would confirm the antibody test.
You're familiar with the fact that in this case, not only was DNA used, but also conventional serological techniques. Isn't that right?
Yes.
Did you examine those conventional serological techniques?
No.
If conventional serological techniques were used in this case, and results were obtained from stains from genetic markers other than the DNA markers, don't those constitute additional cross-checks of results?
Yes.
But you didn't look at any of the serological results.
No.
Did you believe it was important to know about any such results?
No. My function was to look simply at the science involved and the data involved in PCR.
Did any member of the defense ever discuss with you the existence of serological results in this case?
No.
Is that a factor that, in your opinion, would have any effect whatsoever on any of the opinions you've rendered in this case?
No, because my opinions are as to the scientific reliability of the PCR-based testing and the chances of error due to cross-contamination.
Is it your testimony that such cross-contamination would necessarily never be detected by serological techniques?
I think it's highly unlikely because PCR is the most sensitive method possible and that those items would have very little amount of material.
Well, you have raised the possibility that some of the Bundy blood drops may have been cross-contaminated by other stains. Is that correct?
Yes.
One of those stains that you've discussed as being possibly cross-contaminated by other material was item number 52. Isn't that right?
That's right.
The amount of DNA in that sample is higher than it is in other blood drops at the Bundy scene, correct? 47, 48, 49, and 50.
52 has approximately 25 nanograms, or I'm not sure what the total yield was, but it has more.
You discussed yesterday the fact that the recommended minimum amount to be used in, for instance, the Roche DQ alpha kit as 2 nanograms, correct?
Correct.
Results are obtained with less than 2 nanograms, aren't they?
It depends on how much lower than that, but you can, yes.
Going back to the serological techniques, as a scientist, wouldn't you want to know all the scientific results on a given blood stain if you were looking at a blood stain case?
It's not my job to look at this entire case. It's my job to evaluate the reliability of PCR-based DNA testing as an independent piece of evidence.
If you were a serological expert and you were asked to review results on blood stains from a crime scene, would you want to know about DNA results?
It depends upon whether I was an expert or asked to be an expert on whatever area. I would think that would be crossing areas of expertise.
Dr. Gerdes,
I don't have any expertise in serological testing.
Dr. Gerdes, aren't all of the results on these blood stains important to evaluate what happened?
I'm sure they are.
In your view, is that good science not to know all the results?
In my view, the way a criminal case should be conducted, if there's scientific evidence involved, you should obtain the expert with the most expertise in every specific type of testing. And it is up to someone else in the case that is not a scientist to evaluate the meaning of that. It's basically up to the jury
Well,
to evaluate. As all of those experts come forward and provide their testimony, it's up to the jury to decide how these pieces fit together. I'm only talking about one piece of this puzzle.
who did you discuss the serological results with?
I didn't.
Did you have any knowledge of them even existing?
Well, I've heard things on TV, but I have no knowledge or access to specific testing.
Once you heard them on TV, did you feel that there was any need whatsoever to find out what they were?
Again, my evaluation is of the PCR-based DNA testing.
With respect to this area of cross-contamination, is it your testimony that contamination wouldn't be picked up by serological techniques?
It depends on the specimen, but I think if it's a specimen with very small amounts, the PCR technique is more sensitive than most serological techniques.
Objection, move to strike. Vote non-responsive. All right, Dr. Gerdes, you have described various forms of contamination in your view. Is that correct?
Yes,
One of those forms was cross-contamination.
that's correct.
One of those forms was carryover contamination.
Correct.
And by carryover, that's from amplified DNA possibly getting into DNA that's lower in amount and unamplified, correct?
Correct.
Is it correct that contamination is just as big a problem at your laboratory as it is in forensic laboratories?
I don't believe that's true because of the nature of the specimens that are handled and the way they're handled in forensic labs.
Well, you have contamination in your own laboratory, don't you?
Occasionally we'll see that, yes.
You feel you have a pretty good handle on contamination at your laboratory?
Yes, there's a number of differences in the way we handle contamination in a clinical lab, as well as the nature of the specimens and that
Excuse me,
entire board
objection.
that we talked about.
Non-responsive, Your Honor.
Overruled. Answer will stand. Ask another question.
Dr. Gerdes, with respect to your laboratory, do you continue to offer services to clients despite these instances of contamination that occur.
Yes.
Incidentally, when you're given a sample, how do you receive it?
It's received as a sterile blood specimen.
Okay,
or
I'm
another
really
specimen.
referring to the actual mechanical manner. How do samples get from to your laboratory from somewhere else?
They are transported by a courier.
Do you receive any samples that are not transferred by a courier?
There are some mailed in.
By what? A package service or a
Yes.
shipping service?
FedEx or whatever, yes.
Are they packed under ice?
Most are not, some might be.
Where could they be coming from? Where
Well,
do they come from?
They come from a variety of hospitals and other sources.
How long a period of time can it be from when that sample is removed from a patient to the time your laboratory receives it?
That's recorded in terms of the request form as to when it was drawn and when it's received. It can be up to a day or two.
Is it ever any longer than a day or two?
Yes.
How long could it be? Or can it be?
Well, one of the processes that occurs when a sample arrives in the lab is the first thing the technician does is they look at that time, and if it's too long, they'll reject the specimen.
What's too long?
It depends on the type of test.
Okay, what would be, I'm trying to think in terms of the testing that you do, and let's take CMV.
Okay?
At what time period would a sample be rejected?
In that particular case, the DNA of that virus is relatively stable in a blood specimen that's stored at ambient temperature. I would say somewhere on the order of 5 or 6 days, we would still see no real decrease in the amount of DNA that we could detect to allow us to find that virus.
And at the 5 or 6 day period, that would be unrefrigerated for those 5 or 6 days?
Yes.
You continue to go ahead and use that sample for casework typing?
Yes, because we've done previous validation studies to show or assure ourselves that that's
So the refrigerating of the blood always got me. And he just said that he used blood that's been unrefrigerated for days. And it always got me just because they don't find bodies the day that they're murdered. They just don't. So on all the murder cases, the blood is old. The blood has been, there for weeks, months, years, days. It's not like they gave a sample before immediately before they were murdered. And all the cases that we still do tests on. So them making a big deal out of refrigerated blood didn't make sense to me. And what also didn't make sense to me was that the prosecution never really pressed that point. Like, yeah, it doesn't, it's not that it doesn't matter, it's just that it's not, they can still do work on blood that's been out in the elements for a long time. And it is snowing outside, and I'm so happy.
specimen is still adequate at that point. As long as it's sterile, undamaged, labeled.
In other words, as long as the DNA hasn't degraded to the point of not being able to obtain a result, then it's okay to use it.
Well, you have to remember, blood that's in a sterile blood specimen like that is really it's not going to degrade. It's not contaminated with bacteria. And it's different reasons why you would, eventually it would degrade. But basically the problem is the cells that are in that blood specimen. If, for instance, we're going to do HLA typing, we need those within 24 hours because the cells start to die. And it's not a degradation process. There are other complications as to why, and it's specific to each test as to why that specimen would be appropriate or not.
You described yesterday the fact that, in your view, strike that. You described the fact yesterday that a forensic protocol required that reference samples be separate in time as far as their extraction of DNA. 20 to 30 minutes from evidence samples. Do you recall that testimony?
Yes.
Do you recall also describing that after a reference sample has had DNA extracted from it, that there should be a cleanup with bleach of that area where that's taking place, and then evidence samples can be extracted? Do you recall that testimony?
This takes the testimony in terms of the specifics.
I recall that testimony.
What forensic protocol says that?
The Twig Dam guidelines and a variety of protocols from individual labs that I have read specifically state that reference samples should be handled at a separate time and place than the evidence items.
But as far as this procedure of reference samples, cleaning the area with bleach, and then extracting DNA from evidence samples, what forensic protocol requires that?
Well, it's amazing. None of them say it that specifically. Those are pretty common sense things, though, if you're a microbiologist or
Objection, move to strike, Your Honor.
someone who knows about sensitivity of of PCR, I think those are common sense things that you would do.
Dr. Gerdes, what forensic protocol says to do those things?
There is no forensic protocol that specifically says to do those things.
When you testified yesterday that a forensic protocol requires that, then were you mistaken?
Misstates the
Sustain.
testimony.
Phrase the question.
When you described yesterday that a forensic protocol required those steps, was that then not the case?
Basically, what I was referring to was the fact that forensic protocols, numerous forensic protocols, state that you should handle the reference sample at a separate time and place than evidence items, or large amounts of DNA separate than small amounts. And I'd have to look in detail in the user guide. I believe there is a section in there that discusses these kinds of things in the user guide in terms of cleaning up.
Dr. Gerdes, isn't it wiser to extract evidence samples first before reference samples?
The main factor you have to keep in mind is to separate them both in time and space. If you are going to be handling them within a fairly close time, it would be advisable to handle the lower concentration specimen before the larger. So in that case, yes.
In other words, it would be better to extract DNA from evidence samples first because of their potential for having low DNA amounts, and then reference samples later because they have higher DNA amounts, correct?
Yes.
What order was that done in by the Los Angeles Police Department in this case?
As far as the handling, the reference sample was handled first. As far as the extraction, it was in the opposite order, where the reference sample was handled last.
Dr. Gerdes, isn't it true that Colin Yamauchi extracted the evidence first before the known samples in this case?
As far as the extraction, yes. As far as the handling, no.
As far as the extraction of DNA by Colin Yamauchi in the serology room that you've described by photograph, he extracted the low DNA amount samples first, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
He extracted the high DNA samples last, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
Incidentally, do you ever test any mixed samples in your laboratory?
No.
Have you ever conducted any any testing in your laboratory involving, for instance, amniotic fluid cells?
Yes.
What is amniotic fluid?
Well, it's the fluid that surrounds the baby, and it's used for diagnosis of prenatal diagnosis.
In other words, you're looking to find out if a fetus will suffer from any diseases, correct?
Correct.
In that process, you're attempting to make a clinical diagnosis of whether or not an unborn child will contract, let's say, cystic fibrosis.
Yes.
That testing was formerly conducted in your laboratory?
We have conducted testing not on the amniotic fluid itself, but we have conducted testing on cells that were grown from that fluid.
Do you continue to do that in your laboratory?
Occasionally.
When that type of material is removed from the patient, the pregnant mother, doesn't that material contain a mixture of cells from two different people?
It can.
And in fact, it can contain a mixture of cells from the pregnant mother,
Yes.
and it can contain a mixture of cells from the fetus, which is the cellular material you're trying to test, correct?
That's correct.
And you have to, in terms of that testing, separate those cells out, don't you?
Yes, and in that particular instance, you know who the mother is, and so that allows you to eliminate that source.
Isn't that similar to a sexual assault victim in a criminal case who's been raped?
It is in some ways, yes.
And there's a mixture of cellular material in that type of sample as well.
Yes.
Yesterday, you described the fact that in theory, a single cell, one cell from a person, a human, could be copied using PCR. Do you recall that?
Yes.
When you stated that in theory, isn't it correct that there are laboratories that do copy single cells outside forensics?
Single cells?
Yes.
Yes, there are labs who have done that, and it's not something that's done. It's not very many labs, but there are labs that can do that.
It's not done in forensics, correct?
That's correct.
Because one cell is not very much DNA, correct?
That's correct.
Isn't it true that the problem of contamination depends to a large extent on how small a sample one is trying to amplify?
Yes, the problem of contamination is increased with a smaller sample.
For instance, in typing a single cell, a scientist would have to be extraordinarily careful about contamination, correct?
Yes.
And in fact, copying one cell would be presumably what? The height of sensitivity to contamination problems that a scientist could have.
Yes, but they're not typing a single cell from a crime scene. They're typing single cells in a controlled laboratory environment where they can dilute that down in sterile materials and know what they started with.
So contamination isn't a problem for that type of sample with one cell?
It is a problem. It's a problem anywhere.
It's an important problem to someone trying to copy very small numbers of cells, correct?
Yes.
One would be a very small number, correct?
Yes.
At your laboratory, your tests using PCR start with different numbers of cells that are present in a sample. Is that correct?
The PCR test that we use, we adjust the DNA concentrations to higher concentrations that would generally be used, relatively speaking, in a forensic setting. And the reason we do that is to avoid, as much as we can, a contamination problem.
So you make a decision at what level of the number of cells in a sample before you're willing to use PCR to obtain results that you'll report in casework.
Yes.
You have described your laboratory as being capable of detecting as few as 1 to 5 cells in a sample, haven't you?
1 to 5 cells?
Correct.
What kind of cells?
DNA. Copies of target DNA, and we'll define those terms.
The initial PCR that we did was adjusted for CMV. Initial studies were adjusted for us to be capable of detecting 1 to 5 copies of that particular virus. Is that what
All
you're
right.
referring to?
Well, what does target DNA mean?
Well, the gene you're looking for, and the virus is not a cell, so if we're looking for a virus, you're looking for that piece of the virus or sequence of the nucleic acid of the virus, and that would be defined as the target. The target is the virus, and the amount we would be able to detect would be between 1 and 5.
That's, again, a very low level of DNA, correct?
That's correct.
You then utilized a higher number of cells in this CMV testing, correct?
It's not cells. It's adjusted to the higher number of copies detectable with the PCR system of the virus, not a
All
cell.
right. Did you, in fact, adjust it to a higher number of copies to use in your testing?
Yes, the initial studies, again, on the transplant patients where we looked at the CMV, if we used that kind of sensitivity where we found 1 to 5 cells, we were finding it frequently in all of the patients, and it wasn't giving us any clinically relevant information. So we adjusted the technique. Well, we did this study, a 4-year study, to determine what was the relevant amount that would allow us to identify patients that needed to be treated, as opposed to those who had asymptomatic shedding. Then we adjusted the amount so that it would be in that clinically relevant range so that the testing would be useful for patients.
What threshold level do you use now before you'll amplify?
As far as the CMV virus,
Yes.
our sensitivity is around 50 copies.
50 copies of this target DNA.
Yes.
As far as forensic testing, and in particular this case, are you familiar with the number of cycles used by the Los Angeles Police Department when they go through this amplification process?
Yes, I am.
And how many cycles is that?
32.
Is that, in fact, the number recommended by Roche in the user guide?
It is.
Are you familiar with the number of cycles used by Cellmark in this case?
They use 32 also.
And are you familiar with the number of cycles used by the Department of Justice?
They use 32 also.
All 3 laboratories use the recommended number of cycles by the manufacturer.
That's correct.
As far as sensitivity levels, isn't it the case that with regard to forensic testing, that there are certain sensitivity levels of starting DNA, that is the amount of starting DNA, that are recommended?
Yes.
Is it also the case that these numbers of cycles play a role in the ability to copy DNA and obtain results?
Yes.
What role do they play? That is the number of cycles.
Well, in the process, this xeroxing, of molecular xeroxing of a copy of DNA, is basically how long you let the Xerox machine run. If you go, each time you double the amount of DNA and you go 32 cycles, then you have a certain level of amplification ability or copying ability. If you go more cycles, what happens is then you're just like you leave the Xerox machine on longer, you're going to get more copies. And the more cycles, the more DNA you're going to make. Within limits. I mean, eventually you get, it runs out of the things it needs, the building blocks and things to make DNA, and the whole thing stops.
If I were to start a DNA laboratory and I programmed that machine to amplify, say, a bloodstain 50 cycles, would that be a mistake?
It depends on what you're trying to do in terms of protocol. It certainly would be an increased risk of amplifying very small amounts of material and having them become a contaminant.
So the number of cycles becomes important in controlling contamination.
Yes.
And in fact, 32, that wasn't a number picked on a board, that is a dart thrown at a board, isn't that right?
That's right.
And in fact, wasn't the number 32 arrived at by scientific experimentation and demonstration of the appropriate number of cycles to use?
It's the appropriate number of cycles to use for 2 nanograms of DNA, which is what the user guide recommends as far as the starting amount.
Well, isn't it correct that these methods have been shown to produce accurate and reliable results using less than 2 nanograms of starting DNA?
I haven't seen any published detailed studies. There are people who claim that, and there are phraseologies in certain papers where that's claimed. But I think that there are certain dangers that occur when you get down much below, certainly below a half a nanogram.
You've described reading the user guide, correct?
Yes.
And the user guide describes using using amounts less than 2 nanograms as producing accurate and reliable results, correct?
I think there's a phrase in there that says something to the effect that it's possible in an experienced laboratory to possibly type less than that. They don't give an exact amount, how much less, but that phrase is in there.
Hasn't the scientific literature demonstrated typable amounts, that is, amounts producing accurate and reliable results far below 2 nanograms?
I haven't seen any paper that goes to a detailed study of tremendously smaller amounts.
All right, Your Honor, at this time I'd like to shift subjects, and I'm just inquiring on when the court was going to take a break.
3 o'clock.
Very well. I have well, let me ask a couple questions first. In the typing process using PCR, it's important to use controls, correct?
That's correct.
And you described controls yesterday, is that right?
Yes.
Controls are used in this typing process to tell whether or not the test is working correctly.
That's the purpose of controls.
All right, Your Honor, at this time I will have an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper that I would ask to be marked as
557.
557, a copy which I provided to counsel previously. And with the court's permission, I would like to use that on the Elmo.
Proceed.
And Dr. Gerdes, can you, I don't know if it's easier for you to use the monitor to your right or the
I prefer
screen.
to just look from down
Sure,
there, if that's okay.
fine. First of all, you have described previously your examination of various materials from the Los Angeles Police Department, correct?
That's correct. Suggestion about the position, because in this fashion, the witness's back is to part of the jury.
Thank you.
And in fact, you were and have taken the opportunity to review the testing conducted by the Los Angeles Police Department in their DNA laboratory in this case, correct?
That's correct.
And with regard to that testing, you've also described yesterday having reviewed materials from the DNA laboratory unrelated to this case, correct?
Correct.
Now, your review of the DNA typing documents from the Los Angeles Police Department in this case reveals that department's, in particular Colin Yamauchi's, use of a number of controls, correct?
That's correct.
Now, on this particular document, it's labeled at the top, Los Angeles Police Department PCR DQ alpha testing controls. There's a number 1 and the term reagent control. You see that?
I do.
Then in parentheses, and quotation marks, the term cloth control.
Yes.
First of all, what is a reagent control?
This is a control that basically, that's what's called cloth control, a piece of cloth or a swab that's unused, is basically run through the process, including all of the reagents, the buffers, the fluids, and so forth that are used in this process. And then you look at a typing, go through the same typing procedure, and ask the question, is there any evidence of DNA on that particular control? It's a control for contaminants that would be introduced into reagents or things that are going on along that process, all the way from the beginning.
Is that an important control to use?
I think it's an important control. Yes.
Now, there's also the term cloth control. Where does that come from?
That comes from the fact that you take a piece of cloth that has nothing on it, presumably, and you run it through the process.
If a reagent control shows a DNA reaction, for instance, at the ultimate or the last typing phase of the testing process, what does that tell the analyst?
It tells the analyst that at some time, either in handling that cloth or going through all of this process from the very beginning to the end, DNA had been introduced.
That's one control, reagent control, or cloth control as it's also called, correct?
That's correct.
That's a control utilized by the Los Angeles Police Department, not only in their casework in this case, but also in all the other typing that they conducted that you've described yesterday.
That's correct.
The second control, labeled amplification control positive, what's that?
That generally refers to the DNA that is incorporated as part of the kit. So the company that sells this kit has a positive DNA sample. It's a 1.14 type, and it's incorporated in the PCR process just to ensure that the individual who uses the kit can amplify the DNA and that the strips are working.
We have to listen to it to never use it again.
As far as that amplification control, if during this testing process and ultimately at the final end, first of all, are each of these controls actually typed on a strip at the end?
Yes.
In other words, they're handled as far as amplification, typing, and then the analyst reading the results from the dots, just like a regular evidence sample. Is that right?
That's correct.
Let's
Well,
say-
not strictly correct. On an evidence sample, there is a rule with regard to a C dot. And in these types of controls, that rule no longer holds because of the fact that any DNA, anything at all, present on these types of controls indicates that there's human DNA that shouldn't be there, that is visible. So it indicates contamination,
Well,
regardless of what the C is. So as far as typable, that needs to be clarified.
we'll return to the C probe. What you've just described applies to, certainly, number one, the reagent control, correct?
Yes.
Number two, however, what you just said does not apply, correct? Because you expect to find the types 1.1 and 4 as well as a C dot reaction, correct?
Well, actually, it does apply if you find the evidence of another dot other than the 1.1 and 4 dot. Perhaps you would find a 2 dot or a 3 dot. Then you know that there's foreign DNA that has been incorporated into that positive control. So any indication of those kinds of dots on this control indicates contamination.
What I asked, though, Dr. Gerdes, was as far as the C probe is concerned and a reaction, the C probe should show up on the amplification control.
You're right. They didn't get paid by OJ, but they got paid in so many other ways. They became famous. They were already famous, but this was next level for the rest of their lives.
Positive, number two.
That's true.
And in fact, you should see the 1.1 dot, correct?
Correct.
And the 4 dot,
Correct.
and actually also the 1 dot, correct?
Correct.
And one more dot that's also basically reacted to by a 4, correct?
The 1.2, 1.3, 4 dot.
Now, let's turn to, well, let me, while we're on amplification control positive. If that control is a 1.1 and a 4, and all of a sudden there's a 2 dot there, does that signal the analyst to something on that control?
It indicates on that control that there's a human DNA that has been contaminated. That's true. There's a 2 dot on that positive control, and it shouldn't be there.
With respect to number 3, what's labeled amplification control negative, what's that?
This is a control that some people call a water control, and it's incorporated at the stage where you put the samples into the thermal cycler, into the machine that copies things. And that is going to control, basically, it's designed to pick up amplification carryover. So if you're going that product carryover, this is a stage where that would frequently appear. And so this control is really designed to see if that process, that kind of contamination is occurring.
In other words, that's to help the analyst determine whether or not something has invaded the typing process that may affect the results, correct?
Correct.
Turning to number 4, positive control standard. What is that?
This is a known DNA or known specimen. Most laboratories use a blood specimen. They're drawn from individuals who work at the lab, for instance, or known people at least. And then that is run through the entire process of handling and of extracting the DNA and going all the way through until you get a typable result. And it controls for whether or not, on a random basis, using different kinds of types, you're able to get a typable result. It controls for the extraction process, for the amplification process, and for the strips themselves to make sure that they're appropriately typing the sample.
Turning to number 5, a substrate control. What is that?
Substrate control, substrate means, what something is on. So the typical substrate control would be if
My chair is a substrate?
an area, you would take an adjacent area that doesn't appear to have any obvious blood, if it's a blood stain, any blood, and you would take a swab from that area and then carry that through the entire process. Now this is a good control because it goes all the way back to, or should at least, go all the way back to the crime scene. Because if you do that at the crime scene and you carry it through in parallel all the way through, it should tell you not only how much DNA is just sort of like the background DNA in that area at the crime scene, but it also tells you whether during the manipulations, assuming everything was done in parallel, whether during the manipulations that any foreign human DNA might have been incorporated.
Dr. Gerdes, that substrate control is an excellent control, isn't it?
Well, it is an excellent control in terms of determining background level of DNA, as long as, in my opinion, it should be altered. I mean, basically, it doesn't have a stabilizer in there, and I think it could be improved upon. But it is an excellent control.
You have previously described the substrate control as used in forensics as an excellent control, haven't you?
Yes.
Now, with regard to, and lastly, the C probe, you discussed that a few moments ago. That's a probe, is it not, used to help guide the analyst in interpreting results as revealed by reactions on the strips, correct?
The C probe is the least amount of DNA on the strip. It tells you whether there's adequate DNA to proceed with the typing result. If the C probe is not present, you don't have enough DNA to type. It's also, but the probe, this particular C probe fails as a control if you're dealing with mixtures, because in the case of a mixture, you don't know what proportion one contributor and the proportion of the different contributors. There are two contributors. One may have a large amount of DNA, adequate to light up the C dot, and one may have a small amount of DNA, which by itself probably would not have lit up the C dot, but gives you faint detectable signals.
Okay, we're going to end on the probe. Guiding them with not enough DNA. We're ending on that. That's how we're ending today. Okay, I'm just telling you, we are on August 3rd right now. I think everyone loses their minds August 31st and forward. I think, I don't know, I just don't, that the reason why everybody is interested in this trial was nothing that we've heard so far. I think it's everything we hear August 29th and forward. So we put in the time, and we are days away from, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. That's what I think. Again, I do not know, but we're so close. When Furman gets on the stand, well, no, they play Furman's tapes. August 31st is when it begins, I believe. And then we're going to have a whole different trial on our hands. Yep. All right, guys. We'll see you tomorrow. I hope you guys have a great day. It stopped snowing, but you can still have a great day because it did snow. I'll see you all tomorrow. Bye, guys.